Good afternoon, everybody. It's my privilege to be able to have a conversation with you again and bring you up to speed with everything that's happening at school and what our plans are for next term. First of all, I trust that you've had a refreshing and restful time at home with your families. I know it would have looked a lot different, and there would have been a fair amount of social isolation and not being able to see people that you normally catch up with. But I trust that you've been able to get through it all and have stayed safe and healthy. As you would be aware, the Australian government and the South Australian government have both made significant statements this week regarding schooling. And we've been monitoring that, and along with the chief medical officers, both nationally and at a state level, it's very clear that they've made a determination about what it should be looking like for term 2. Look, I wish that there was a blueprint for everything that we're trying to do and how to manage schools, and that someone had come up with a scathingly brilliant plan before this pandemic occurred. But the reality is that we've never done this before, we've never walked this journey before, and so it has been very much a roller coaster ride, both for you as families and for us here at the school. And I apologise for that, but we've just been trying to respond according to the directives we've been given, according to the information that's been provided by government and health experts, and in trying to work out exactly what schooling is going to look like at our 3 sites to make sure that 1, we keep everybody safe, and 2, that we continue to provide a quality education. In that regard, we do need to pause and be incredibly thankful for the situation that we're facing here in Australia. I have 2 children who live in England, and the statistics over there are terrifying. And if that was happening here, we would be in a very different space as a country. They are losing hundreds of people every day. Thousands of people are contracting the virus, and it must be an incredibly difficult time for the UK and other countries like them to manage this crisis. We are very fortunate here in Australia. Over the last 12 days in South Australia, only 10 people have contracted the virus, and while every death is very tragic, we've only had 4 deaths here in South Australia, and there are very few people in South Australia who are now currently deemed to be infectious. This means that we have gotten through these last few weeks relatively unscathed, and because of that, governments have made some determinations about schooling. And this week they made a couple of very clear directives. The first is that schools are safe places for students and teachers, and that therefore there is little reason for schools not to reopen. The second directive they've given, which is more pertinent, is that it is a clear directive from both governments that no child should be turned away from school if the parents choose to send them to school. And so therefore that is obviously impacting on us as a school. Previously, at the end of last term, we were saying, if you can, keep your children at home, but if you need to send them to school, then we will certainly take them so that no child is turned away. Given the announcements by the government and the very low rates of infection, I met with my senior team from all 3 schools yesterday, and we worked through to work out what we were going to be advising our families and our staff in regarding to next term. And we've come to the following determinations, and I do have the letter that I'm about to send you here in front of me as well, so I will be referring to that, so I apologise if I look away at all. First of all, we have determined that as of Monday, 27th of April, we will be business as usual at Tyndale. That means we will be encouraging all families to send their children back to school. Now again, I recognise that is a significant change from the end of last term, but the circumstances have changed dramatically since the end of last term, and we are trying to respond to those circumstances and the directives from government accordingly. We want to encourage you, therefore, to send your kids to school next week. It's going to be really important that we have as many of you back as possible so that we can then manage what teaching looks like. In that regard, in the letter that's coming out to you this afternoon, there will be a link on there which we ask you to go on to. There is a very, very, very short survey there indicating to us whether you'll be sending your children to school next week or not. Please take the time to fill that in, because the more certainty we have about the number of children who are coming back to Tyndale on site, the better we're able to then make determinations about what the education is going to look like. That's the first thing. The next thing is that on Monday, the 27th, when everybody comes back, those who come back, we will continue to run the Learning at Home program, even for those students who are at school, until we've ascertained how many students are back. So the survey will help, but we really won't know fully until everybody who's going to turns up at school. If the vast majority of students come back to school, and I'm talking about a significant majority of students, then we will then transition very quickly back to face-to-face teaching as our preferred method of education. If very few children turn up, then we will stick with the Learning at Home program as our preferred method of education. I'm sort of hoping it'll be one of those two, because that will make the decision rather easy. If we get a situation where we have a significant number staying home and a significant number coming, then we may have to work our way through the next few days accordingly in terms of how we're going to do the education. So I just really want to encourage you to let us know as soon as possible, and then once we get back on Monday and we reconnect with the kids and we do some social interactions, because they'll have been starved of having seen each other and all those sorts of things, we will then run the Learning at Home program on the Monday, and then we will adjust accordingly depending on the number of families that have sent their children to us. Now, what also needs to be recognised is that this will actually be on a campus or sub-school basis. It may well be that one of our schools, and certainly one of our regional schools, may well have the vast majority of their students back within the first few days. If that's the case, they may well transition to a face-to-face program very quickly. It may well be that at Salisbury East, the sub-school may have different scenarios. We may have most of our senior school kids back. And if that's the case, then the senior school may well transition very quickly to face-to-face learning. It may well be that middle school is a bit different, and we may have a significant number of students still away. And on that basis, then we will continue to run the Learning at Home program while managing the students here to the best of our ability. The reality is that week one's going to be a bit of a muddle. That's what the state schools have said about their schools. It won't be seamless. It won't be without its complications. And I'm going to really ask that you be as patient and as generous as possible to us as we work through the first few days. It's going to be really important that we keep the communication lines open, we keep working with each other, and we stay patient and assume the best rather than the worst about each other when we're communicating, so that we can get through these first few days. It is our aim that we can be back to face-to-face teaching by week 2. It may happen earlier, it may happen slightly later, but that's our intention as more and more families send their children to school. Obviously, our great hope is that the statistics that we're getting about COVID-19 in South Australia continue to be incredibly positive, that we continue to have very, very, very few new cases, that the number of people recovering continues to increase compared to any new ones, and that we have a very, very, very low risk of infection in South Australia. Surely that would be everybody's hope, that this virus goes away and never comes back. So that is our hope, and we just want to encourage you that as we work through those first few days, if everything continues to look good, we're hoping that more and more families will then send their children back, and we'll be able to move forward to a reversion to school as normal. Now, please understand one thing though. If we revert to face-to-face teaching at any of our sub-schools or any of our campuses, we will not be running the Learning at Home program in its current form. The reality is that our teachers cannot do both. They cannot run a fully vibrant learning at home program using Dojo and Canvas and Zoom and all those sorts of things and running virtual classrooms while teaching a real classroom here. It's not possible, it's not workable, and it's not sustainable. And so therefore, for those families, if and when we move to a face-to-face teaching environment, then for those families whose children are still at home, they will get a different program to what they're currently set up with. Now, please hear me. This does not mean that you will be abandoned or forgotten or we'll be offering you an inferior quality of education. What this means is it'll be far more static. So that means that there will still be information coming through, there will still be information through Dojo, there will still be educational packs that you can do, there will still be access through Canvas, staff will still be contacting you to follow up any work on any projects or anything that needs to be marked and getting back to students about how they're going, but it won't be live. It won't have the Zoom element to it that we were intending if we'd had to stay closed. That's a really important thing to remember, because it just does not work. And certainly every educational institution and authority around Australia has acknowledged that we can't run two fully functioning programs hand in hand. It's just not sustainable. But please don't worry that somehow if you're keeping your children home that they are going to miss out. That is not the case. We will do the very best we can to continue to provide them with the best quality education we can. The reality though is that at some stage, if all the advice coming from government and all the advice coming from health experts and the say that schools are safe and that if infections remain very, 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 very low, at some stage it is reasonable for us as a school to say we really need everybody back. There is no evidence to suggest that having your children at school is unsafe, and so therefore please everybody send your children back to school. Now, we're not there yet because we're still in these early stages and we're not making that pronouncement or making that determination at this time. But at some stage along the line, if everything continues to be really positive health-wise, that at some stage we will say it's time for everyone to come back because there is no long-term legitimate reason to keep your kids away. Now, there is a proviso or a codicil to that, and that is for those families who have students who are particularly susceptible or would still sit in a high-risk vulnerable capacity. We absolutely understand that there will be some that any slight chance of getting an infection is going to be of a very serious nature, and therefore we need to look after you and we will continue to support you as much as we can. The same actually goes for some of our teachers. And even though we want to get back to a face-to-face teaching program as quickly as possible in all three of our schools, we still do currently have 50 staff across our 3 school campuses who have been designated as high risk. And therefore we're going to be working with them to hopefully minimise that risk, to hopefully be able to work through to a place where they'll be able to return with confidence, but we are not going to put their lives or their health at risk either in this short period. So we want to be able to manage that as well. So please be patient with us, because you may send your kids back, but you may not get a face-to-face teaching program with some of our staff because they will actually still be at home because they have been determined to be vulnerable to this virus over and above the normal population, and we want to care for them. All right, I am just referring to my pieces of paper. Next, for those children who come back, all of our social distancing and hygiene measures will remain in place. That means that we will be managing our classrooms. That means that we will be encouraging very, very important hygiene practices and making sure that our children are doing the right thing in keeping themselves as hygienic as possible and making sure that we have a pristine environment as much as possible when it comes to ensuring that no one is going to be vulnerable or exposed to the virus. So all of those things will be in place. That will also impact on chapels and assemblies and community events and any other large gatherings. All those restrictions will remain in place until such time as the government and health authorities say that it's no longer necessary for us to do that. So please understand that we're not just going, come on back, we're all in, let's have a good time. We will be making sure that we continue to follow good practice, best practice when it comes to hygiene and social distancing. Lastly, I just want to let you know that for those children who do come back, it's business as usual. That means they need to be here for the beginning of school, and I know that that's different across our 3 schools, but start time is when they need to be here. Finish time is when they need to be collected or heading off on the buses. So it's normal school day, and we'll be running it as a normal school day. As much as possible, we would expect that all the students who are coming to school will be back in school uniform. We want it to be as business as usual as possible, so they will come in school uniform. We do understand that for some of you, you may not have been able to access a winter uniform, or your summer uniform may no longer be suitable, and so therefore we've said that in the first few days, first week or so, that if students are wearing their summer uniform, their winter uniform, or their PE uniform, that's fine, as long as they're coming to school in a uniform that the school has provided. And if you have any concerns or questions about that, please don't hesitate to contact us as well. I absolutely acknowledge that what we've just announced is not going to suit everybody. We know that there are going to be families setting off champagne poppers and cheering that they can send their children back on Monday, and we have provided that because that is what the government is asking us to do, that is what the State Department is doing, and that is what the health authorities are saying is okay to do. We are doing it on that regard, but we also understand that there'll be some families who will be very anxious about sending their children back to school, and that this new arrangement won't be what you wanted to hear. The reality is that we don't come to these conclusions or make these determinations lightly. We've struggled through them, we've argued about them, we've tried to grapple with what it means, and we believe that as best as we're able, we're trying to get everybody as much as possible back to school, given the circumstances, get school going as well as possible in terms of business as usual, but also look after those families who are quite legitimately and naturally concerned about their kids. If you fall into that second category where you are going, I'm really anxious about sending my children back to school, and that you are at this stage thinking that you will keep them home, please don't hesitate to contact us to clarify anything that I've said in regarding to the program that your children will be experiencing. I'm sorry that I can't promise you that once we go back to face-to-face teaching that it'll be all whiz-bang stuff, that it will be different than what we've been working on, but as much as possible, we will continue to collaborate with you, connect with you, communicate with you, so that the education for your kids goes ahead and continues to be something that will set them up for the future. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please make sure you access the link, and I look forward to seeing you, as many of you as possible, next Monday here at Salisbury East. I will be out in the car park in my green vest welcoming you all back, and for those of you at the 2 regional schools, I'll be down as soon as I can and hopefully connect up with your students and the staff down there as soon as possible. God bless you. We're praying for you all, and we look forward to us getting back to some sense of normality in term 2. Thanks for listening.